Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. Pitching India as the world's destination for the next big idea, Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday asked, if Indians can work in Google, why can't Google be made in India? Talking about his dream of digitally connecting India, Prime Minister Modi launched his ambitious Digital India project. The project aims to create a digitally empowered society and knowledge economy. The PM described Digital India as a roadmap to change India's future. The government plan aims to stop net imports of technology and electronics by 2020, while creating over 100 million jobs. Even though India is a global IT powerhouse, the usage of IT in governance and various sectors of the economy is still comparatively low. So is Digital India a transformative program? How is it going to make difference to your life and my life? This is what I'm asking in today's edition of Insight. And joining me on the program today, very esteemed guests, with me, cyber law expert and also advocate Supreme Court, Pawan Duggal. Thank you very much, Mr. Duggal, for joining us in this program. Also with me, Professor Rajat Katuria, who is Director ICRIER. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us in this program. Also with me, Professor Charu Malhotra from Indian Institute of Public Administration. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us here. And with me, Karnika Seth. She's also a cyber law expert. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us in this program. So in the first segment, let's try and understand the very concept of Digital India. And coming straight to you, Mr. Duggal, how Digital India is going to make a difference to your life and my life?
Well, the plan is very simple. The plan is 3 years and you digitally transform a nation. The plan is ultimately to make electronic governance as the de facto mode. In fact, governance is going to be on your hand in the form of smart governance on your smartphones. The reality is to somehow use information technology as a catalyst for the purposes of not just creating far more transparency and accountability, but also creating a far more conducive environment for the Indian citizenry at large. So in a broad sense, I believe it's going to be a game changer if it's going to be implemented in its fullest extent possible. But the fact still remains that there are 9 different pillars, there's lots of work, and there are huge challenges ahead.
Huge challenges ahead, but do you really see this as a transformative program? When Prime Minister Modi was talking about it yesterday, he said that this is going to be a transformative program. I'm looking for that connection, bridging rural-urban divide. Can that really happen at this stage? And is this really a new concept? We have seen this earlier also. The Congress is saying this is a repetition of our old idea.
Well, this kind of an idea has been going on for quite some time, but to bring it in a holistic perspective as a huge umbrella and as a packaged program, this is happening for the first time. It's wonderful in its concept. It indeed would be a game changer if implemented properly. But if it's not going to be implemented properly, there are going to be gaps. And there are huge challenges from the word go at the very first instance. For example, the legal frameworks for promoting the Digital India framework are completely non-existent. We have in place an Indian cyber law that we enacted 15 years back. The last time we amended it, it was the year 2008. At no point of time was there any vision to use information technology as a means for participative governance. And consequently, those respective parameters that are required are distinctly missing. More significantly, the entire pyramid of Digital India is based on cyber security. And I think that's one area that huge work needs to be done, given the fact that India does not have a dedicated law on cyber security, and that we have done a cosmetic, shall I say, lip service to cyber security.
And yesterday, Prime Minister also talked about cyber security and its importance as far as internal security is concerned. But in terms of, you're calling this a paradigm shift, but sort of preparedness which is needed. Maybe we can talk about this later in this segment. But Professor, how are you seeing it? Is this really a transformative program, or what is the important takeaway for you from this Digital India program?
I think it is a potentially transformative program. There is no doubt about that. And I think the newness in this, or the novelty in this lies, as I think Pawan mentioned, the newness lies in bringing everything together. And the sum of the whole is going to be greater than the parts. And so you're going to get all that, spillover impacts, the benefits, what the economists call the externalities. I mean, that's going to kick in because, I mean, there are a number of challenges and we could talk about them later in the program. But for our country, I mean, Digital India for our country means that, there are deficits in service delivery. There are acknowledged deficits in service delivery. We are an IT powerhouse. We've become an IT powerhouse. We provide IT professional to every corner of the world. And there are so many incidents and anecdotes that reflect our power in IT. You have IT professionals all over the world. Google employs X number of Indians in the United States, large number, I don't know the exact number, but there are a large number of Indians employed in Google. I mean, so the diaspora potentially can help in transformation of the IT sector here. But everything has to be put together, and I think that's what the novelty about this program is. Public service delivery, IT professionals, hardware.
Right.
I mean, also manufacturing hardware within the country, which dovetails with the Make in India program that the Prime Minister and this government has announced.
And also the sector has a huge potential for investments, because the sort of FDIs we are looking for, and as you rightly pointed out, what the connection with the Make in India program, bringing in electronic clusters and comparing ourselves with other countries where China has a huge dominant role to play. 40% of the electronic markets is actually is occupied by China. In that scenario, where do you see ourselves placed? The Make in India program, the Skill India program, and now the Digital India program.
Well, as I said, that the potential is huge for transformation. The potential is huge, and I think what's happening around in the world, the gods are conspiring to help us in some sense, right?
Are you talking about the external situation?
The external situation. I mean, I'm not talking about Greece at the moment.
Greece is not going to impact us.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the fact that industries in China are facing higher costs of doing business, as everybody has said. In fact, the wages in China are going up. And that space that is being vacated can be occupied in India. And that's where Make in India could be a successful program for electronics, and not only for electronics, it could be a manufacturing base for a number of other industries, electronics in particular. We had some problems within the electronic sector in India earlier, which is, it was more efficient to import a final product and sell it in India, because we had something called an inverted duty structure. The finance minister in the last budget has announced a redressal of that inverted duty structure. And combined with the Make in India program, the thrust that is being given to special economic zones, to industry clusters, to the national investment and manufacturing zones and economic corridors, I mean, all that thrust can, as I said, can come together and help us manufacture electronics in India, and that will contribute to the success of Digital India. But Digital India has many, many implementation challenges, and we, as I said, we can talk about them. And we will talk about
the challenges also
in the
spectrum
program.
Issues, the optical fiber network, which should be actually 30,000 kilometers.
But let me just say, as kind of a last comment in this segment, is that potentially this is transformative. If everything comes together, I think we can see, as I said, the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay, Professor Malhotra, you just heard Professor Katuria, who's saying that the external situation is very good and is very conducive, not being very thankful to the Prime Minister, who said that he's very lucky. I remember last time, while addressing one of his speeches, he said that he is very fortunate that the situation has also changed because of him. But then quickly, your comments on the fact that how things are going to change, because Prime Minister yesterday also said that new opportunities for the Indian youth to make careers in a very different environment, making India a leader in the next 10 to 15 years.
I personally feel, taking it forward from what both of them said, not just youth, but Digital India is here to empower all the citizens by and large, which was not there. Earlier, when we would look at its predecessor, which was National E-Governance Plan, NEGP, it was focusing more on delivery of public services. And now you find more of inclusive component in this, where you see a part of participative governance, which was not there. You see a component of building up the digital highway infrastructure within the country, not just focusing on common service centers, but also on mobile availability, and also focusing on NOFN. So yesterday I was listening to Prime Minister Modi, hats off to him. He very rightly said, he said earlier civilizations were built around rivers, and now civilizations would be built around infrastructure, which is like NOFN for us now. So what I liked about Digital India per se was the holistic nature of the program. Umbrella program NEGP was also there, but this is more holistic because it talks about infrastructure, it talks about services, it talks about digital literacy. the capacity building of citizens as well as the officers is going to bring in a wonderful transformative change for us.
Okay.
So it's not just external factors, it is the vision of a Prime Minister to also empower each and every citizen, not just as a beneficiary of the services, but also as delivery agents being on government side.
And also the role of mobiles, because the fact that, you know, the shift from e-governance to m-governance, the mobile governance, and how it's going to really ensure the well-being of every citizen of this country, bridging the rural-urban divide, the potential of the mobile network.
Potential of mobile theoretically, yes, is immense, but let's look into the demographic setup of our country. Let's look at the diversity of our country. You would find there are certain states who are amazing in their telecom delivery and infrastructure. There are other states which are laggard ones. 2G is a reality for sure, but 4G and beyond, which is actually required to use governance services on smartphones, is something we need to look into. Second is delivery of the apps, the relevant apps.
Right.
My concern even in NEGP was the content itself.
Right.
Not talking about mobile apps which should be meaningful for rural citizens. I've been to almost 60 villages of our country very closely, stayed with them. You have to see it from their lens, their perspective. Building up rural and urban divide is the differences is possible only if A, they get the infrastructure, B, they get the relevant content, and C, they are empowered to use it. I've been to villages where I found NEGP program is there. I mean, even building up of a particular CSC was there on the first floor, and on the ground floor, the landlord who had outlet that service or that center was not aware of it being an e-governance center where he could even apply for passport. He just said, "Ma'am, ये तो computer training center है." So awareness is a very important.
So awareness is another component of Digital India. But
building up rural urban.
Right, as far as bridging the rural urban divide is concerned, but what sort of combination of efforts will be needed as far as the implementation of Digital India program is concerned?
Well, as regards the program, I call it as a silver lining. It's something like, India is awakening to the fact that now we will have Digital India, and I completely agree it would be empowering. The only concern which I think most of us would agree on will be the implementation challenges.
Right.
Namely, first of all, the literacy level. Have we really imparted them, the people, the rural population, even the urban population, some part of it, the right knowledge as a prerequisite skill to really use this medium of, technology, which is completely, it's completely new, it's dynamic. It's as if you're telling a child that you hold the firecracker and you burst it, and he has no idea of how to, what kind of cautions are required to do that. The point is, you give them the infrastructure, you give them the technology, and the devices are there, but the preparedness, the mental preparedness to really use it in the right way is also what is equally important.
Right. So
and I think it cannot be sidelined. It cannot be sidelined. Now, that's one thing. Funding is another, and there are a lot of other issues. But for me, I think the major part being capacity building, I think is a vital role to play in this whole
Infrastructure and
process.
funding. Now, these are two concerns when we are talking about Digital India. I'll focus on the challenges on the other side. But in terms of, we only talk about cable networks. What about the content? How it will be used? Is there much awareness on that front? And do you think, in terms of investments, 4.5 lakh crore of investments coming in straight away for the Digital India program, how will this be used? And looking at our past targets, the implementation, these are areas which will require just more than a grand vision?
Definitely, we require a lot of hard work. We require planning and analysis as to find out how we want to do it. At the end of the day, this Digital India network will not be an English-centric network.
Right.
It will have to be a local vernacular language-centric as well, in addition to the English language. Primarily because we would expect large number of Indians who are not English literate to be also jumping onto the bandwagon. But the bigger issue will be, you will also have to ensure that the optical fiber networks will have to be appropriately put at the right places at the right times. Currently, when one looks at the internet penetration, I think that's one big area that I'm concerned about. The internet penetrations in India is dramatically low as compared to the vision or the perspective that that people have of India as a rising IT superpower.
Right.
I think we need to match up the figures of 80 to 85% penetration if we really want to actually transform India totally. But in case if you're not able to match up the capacity building in terms of infrastructure with the content, with the aspirations of the people, there will be a challenge, because now this is a huge vision. It's a huge dream that's been sold, and the people are very anxious to get onto the bandwagon.
Right.
And in case if those bandwagon exercises doesn't take properly, there are going to be disillusionments.
And
we
what sort
should
of
provide.
homework is needed? What sort of homework is needed in terms of implementation? Because, you know, looking at the address yesterday that happened, what's your assessment? Do you think that at this stage the government is well prepared? The nitty-gritties, do you think that the game plan is ready?
I think these are still early days. We've just done the inauguration. A lot of work has yet to be done. In fact, work is in progress as far as the government is concerned. The 9 pillars have yet to be effectively developed.
Right.
Each pillar has to be identified in terms of what kind of a technical, infrastructure, legal and policy support has to be given for each pillar per se. More significantly, I think targets have to be drawn up. Content generation exercises have to be created. All stakeholders have to be put on board, because the perception now is, well, Digital India program is a government program. No, it's not a government program. All stakeholders will have to play an increasingly important, significant role, whether
And that's been the
governments,
very idea
non-governments.
of the NDA government, to make governance participatory, and we have seen this earlier also, you know, in many of Prime Minister's addresses, also during his Mann Ki Baat, where he wanted to involve people, where he wants to involve citizens in regular governance. But if you have to compare this Digital India program with the early harvest programs of the government, you know, talk about SMSs, talk about e-books, biometric attendance, also about government employees having secured emails. Now, nobody wants to use those emails. They want to go to Gmail, they want to go to Yahoo. Is there a significant problem which the government has failed to address?
I mean, there have been implementation bottlenecks in India, and one can, you know, talk a lot about the implementation bottlenecks. But let's for a moment pause and look at the positives as we move forward. As Pawan was saying, that what Digital India will need, there have been problems in implementation, and there have been problems in implementation over the last 2 decades. You know, since internet and mobile, you know, opened up in India, and I recall in '94 we had many licensing related problems even in '94. And you know, but the sector has evolved, and the sector has evolved. Mobile has delivered. You were asking a question about mobile. I think mobile has delivered enormous success. And the reason mobile has delivered enormous success is that mobile only needed to have an infrastructure in place, which we put in place, and then you allowed people to talk to each other, which they did, which required 2G, and people talked like they never talked before. But internet, and you know, taking off from what Pawan just said, internet and, you know, Digital India requires a completely different set of conditions. Infrastructure is only a necessary condition. It needs people to talk, but it also needs people to communicate through data, and that remains a challenge. So what we need is relevant information, relevant content, and content which is in the relevant and understandable language of the people, so that the ecosystem around the internet is going to be very different from the ecosystem
So
around
use of
the
local
mobile.
languages, but apart from infrastructure, as you rightly pointed out, also focus on content. And it's now time for me to take a short break. Next, when we come back, on the other side, we'll focus on specific challenges as far as the implementation of Digital India program is concerned. Stay tuned.
वो लोग जिन्होंने अपनी हिम्मत, अपने हौसले के बल पर लिखी कामयाबी की नई दास्तां और बन गए आम इंसान से खास। ये उन्हीं की कहानी, उन्हीं की जुबानी। देखिए आम आदमी खास पहल, हर बुधवार रात 8:30 बजे, सिर्फ लोकसभा टेलीविजन पर। वो परेशानियां जो आपको इधर उधर भटकने पर मजबूर कर देती थी, लेकिन आपके हाथ कुछ नहीं आता। हम आपके लिए लेकर आते हैं उन सभी परेशानियों का कानूनी समाधान। लीगल पॉइंट। जनता के सपने, सरकार के काम, करती है संसद सबका समाधान।
सबका साथ सबका विकास में मुझे आपका भी साथ चाहिए।
देखिए हमारी संसद और समझिए कैसे बनता है देश का विधान।
Welcome back. You're watching Inside. The Narendra Modi government's Digital India program, following on the heels of Make in India and Skill India, aims to build infrastructure and provide the internet as a utility to every citizen. It also promises to improve service delivery by making services available online, and it also seeks to enable people to access the internet by building digital literacy. It is being seen as an effective tool to deal with the problem of corruption, help provide efficient governance and bridge the rich-poor divide. So in this segment, let's try and understand the important challenges in the execution of the Digital India dream. And coming back to you, Mr. Dugal, if you go by the Geneva-based Apex Global Telecom Agency, ITU, it rates India as low as 129 out of 166 countries in respect of digital development. So we have a long way to go in developing that potential for Digital India. But the back-end infrastructure, in terms of what is it that needs to be done, we have not really achieved our targets of national optic fiber network. It has been pushed to by December 2016. The current place of the optic fiber network is about 500 kilometers a month. What we need is about 30,000 kilometers a month. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of work needs to be done. As I said, it's a fabulous beginning, but it is humongous task lying ahead. When I talk about infrastructure, let me talk not just about technical infrastructure, but also about legal infrastructure. At the end of the day, this huge network is going to be carrying huge amounts of data, including personal data, sensitive personal data of citizenry as a whole. Consequently, it's important to have in place legal frameworks that can help protect the said data, help protect the personal privacy and the data privacy. This entire Digital India program is built on big data.
Right.
So therefore, big data issues will have to be addressed left, right and center. We can't leave it to a very amorphous Information Technology Act trying to deal with the challenges of big data. Also, cyber security, look, I think the world by and large is looking at India. And so are hackers, and so are cyber criminals. The dark net is looking at the Indian ascent. So consequently, it's but natural to expect that state and non-state actors would increasingly be concerned about getting access into the Digital India network, because it's the biggest network of a potentially big superpower that's coming up. So we need to ensure that we not only come up with the deterrent punishments for unauthorized access to cyber security breaches, but more significantly, effectively implement the law. But more significantly, going on a much bigger platform, I also believe that work needs to be ultimately done in terms of capacity building.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it has to be a change of a mindset. We will somehow have to inculcate in India the concept of cyber security as a way of life, if you really want Digital India to succeed.
And where do you see this in our priority list? Because when we're talking about Digital India, social security networks, let's not forget about UID. And one of the major problems with UID was about whether it can really protect data or not, and whether we are equipped to do that. At this stage, looking at the government and the sort of strategy it has with Digital India, how far we are equipped in tackling this challenge? Currently,
we are not at all equipped at all. In fact, I believe we are just about beginning to push in the first few pages of the first chapter of the book. The law is completely inadequate. The law needs a complete overhaul, because the Digital India vision has to be supported by enabling legal frameworks if you really want concrete results.
Right.
Number two, we also have to somehow look at cyber security. The National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 was put up in a vacuum. 2 years down the line, it's a paper tiger. And it requires a revision right away, primarily because the Digital India program now compels some immediate new realities which have to be taken into consideration. So the existing telecom policy will have to have a relook. The existing national cyber security policy needs to have a relook. A lot of existing frameworks. We're also talking about the Digital India program ultimately trying to expedite the judicial system.
Right.
Now that's great, but then there'll be required to be changes in some other pieces of legislation so as to help a more expeditious disposal of cases.
And the government has talked about digital lockers and scholarship portal, e-Kranti, and there are several other steps, categorically suggested by the Prime Minister yesterday. But, one major problem, and call drops is a major issue, connectivity is a major challenge. How far do you think that, spectrum availability, in that scenario, regulation of the telecom sector, how difficult it is, because, one thing that strikes me is when I talk about Digital India, I cannot get a straight, decent phone call. And spectrum is a major problem. Connectivity, here sitting in Delhi is a major problem. How far I can access these services?
I can give you a long answer to this question, but let
You're
me
free
give
to
you
do that.
a short answer to this question is that, you know, after many years, we've got the institutional design, I think, just about right. We've got a regulator in place, we've got a policymaker in place, we've got the stakeholders in place, we've got an appellate authority for the telecom sector. We've got the institutional design element after a lot of hiccups and a lot of problems, issues that were created. We've got that in place now for the telecom sector. It, as Pawan is saying, that needs to be now made more contemporary, that needs to evolve to reflect the new realities. Now, in this institutional part that we got right, the separation of powers, etc., the market design we haven't yet got right. And what I mean by market design is that the spectrum allocation issues, the issues of rolling out of, you know, the optical fiber network, 256,000 kilometers connecting, 256,000 villages being connected with optical fiber network of minimum bandwidth that was said to be completed by, you know, this year or even before this, is nowhere near completion. So I think how is this network going to be rolled out, how is this infrastructure going to be rolled out, is going to be a real challenge. And I mean, there are issues of, you know, who's going to do it, there are market issues. To give you an answer on the specific question you asked about spectrum allocation, the National Optical Fiber Network is going to, you know, be the backbone network, and then spectrum is necessary in India because last mile will continue to remain a problem for 1.3 billion people. Last mile will always be a problem, save in cities like, you know, Delhi and Mumbai where the density is high. In other parts of the country, last mile access is going to be a problem. The NOFN is not going to be able to reach every nook and corner. So spectrum will become extremely valuable. In fact, it will be a critical resource in delivery of services. When you compare Indian operators, and we have a very fragmented market in India, and that's where I think the kind of licensing regime needs to evolve a bit, which is that we now give licenses in telecom based on, you know, for internet on a city basis and a state basis, for mobiles on a state basis. I think this needs to go now. Licensing needs to become, you know, pan-India level. You give, and there are, TRAI has given recommendations and hopefully over time these will be implemented. But what this has done is that it's made the market, every circle has about 8 to 10 operators. And you have a certain amount of spectrum that is available in a circle, in a state which is contiguous with the license in most cases. Then that spectrum has to be divided amongst those 8 people.
Now, for the benefit of our viewers, if I have to quickly ask you, how do you compare the situation with other countries, you know, in terms of...
I was about to say that the spectrum holding in India per operator is considerably less than what operators in other countries have. So if operators in other countries have about roughly 25 megahertz of spectrum, in India, you know, a typical operator would be having about 10 megahertz.
And the government has a role to play, it can regulate these...
Of course, government allocates spectrum through auctions after the Supreme Court verdict of 2010, where earlier licenses were cancelled. Now the Supreme Court has mandated that the allocation of this very critical and valuable and extremely expensive resource is done only by auction.
So reduce the number of operators, maybe that can be an answer.
Well, reducing the number of operators is certainly a possibility, and that reduction in the number of operators has to be done by a regime of mergers and acquisitions and consolidation that is put in place that enables mergers to take place. You don't want to put a regime in place which inhibits acquisition from happening. And I think, to my mind, the current regulation is not very conducive for operators to come together. And if they do come together, then spectrum, you know, you will have the firm that is acquiring will get additional spectrum.
And these are issues, Professor Malhotra, which will have a direct impact on the very implementation of the Digital India program, apart from hoping for big jobs which will happen, or the sort of investment which we are looking at. You know, even when we talk about the population here, rural population, these are the digitally unempowered people, and how do you actually bring them online, access to computers, internet penetration figures I have suggest only 9% of those who live in rural areas have actually access to the internet, whereas 64% of people have access to internet in cities. So this is in fact a huge gap, and how do you tackle this?
There are two aspects to this problem. One is the infrastructure itself, as you pointed out, and second is, as I've been saying, about the HR issues. Now, with regard to infrastructure, I feel we need a lot of economic growth and a healthy economy to do that, and for that we need a lot of private investments. For that, now when I was yesterday itself talking to Mr. Jayant Sinha, he was with us, the state finance minister, and the issue which we flagged in at IAP was the basic concept of public-private partnership. Now this needs to be relooked again, because we need a lot of private investments, we need market funding to build up this infrastructure to reach all the rural people of our country, which are, you know, it's base is so high, the bottom of the pyramid is so high. Second are the HR issues. Now with regard to HR issues, there are two concerns again. Is my implementation agency itself equipped?
Right.
Let's look at NIC, for example, National Informatics Centers. I personally feel the training is required not just at the other end, the recipient end, but NIC itself needs to be revamped a lot. With regard to DATI, if we look at Department of Electronics and Information Technology, it still needs more people to effectively bring up the program in a very healthy way, you know, a sustainable manner.
Right.
And third is also the CIOs and CTOs required at the state level. Second, as I've been saying, being a part of an institute like Indian Institute of Public Administration, I personally feel the capacity building of the officers themselves needs to be re-looked into. There should be a portal, which we've been saying, which e-governance competency framework has already been announced by NEGD. With its toolkit, if you look at the implementation toolkit, it is still crying a lot. It says that we need to have these programs, but we don't have a holistic portal.
Right.
So IAP is proposing that let us have an LMS and KMS, the learning management systems and knowledge management systems, for all the officers, where they could have access to e-governance content itself, because they themselves need to be trained. At SMET level, the basic state mission e-governance, these people also need to be trained. Workshops and leadership events need to be conducted, and IAP is doing it through a cascading effect of TOT.
Right, but
training
this sort of
trainers.
target of 2020 of, you know, in terms of generation of jobs and also producing electronic products, this rather looks a distant dream in terms of, you know, Professor Malhotra, you know, when you're talking about capacity building, this is rather very huge. But quickly, your comments on this in terms of challenges and also mobile penetration, because you still have almost 43,000 villages where there is no mobile signal. So when we're talking about universal access to phones, how will this happen?
Well, that's a major, I mean, I would say a drawback at this point, because we don't have that kind of penetration, and with the help of mobiles only, I think it will reach rural India very quickly, because it's affordable and it's something that is easily, you know, can be used by even a person who's not really literate, because Hindi letters are also on the mobile. My major concern here as regards legal aspect here is that we don't have a convergence law in India. We are talking about digital India, but we need to have a convergence law. You can ban sending more than 200 SMSs. You know, there was a ban for with TRI, which I think that was once launched. But then there was a circumvention of that ban through internet. So where is the conversion? We are talking about digital India. We need to have a convergent law first of all. And secondly, we also need to look at the other aspect. The IT Act itself has a lot of loopholes.
Right.
When you talk about the major sections on crime, they have, most of them are bailable sections. As a result, electronic evidence gets tampered. So this is a major problem. So when we talk about laws, a lot of crimes are not even defined, leave alone defined, not even mentioned in the IT Act. So the overhauling of the IT Act in the first place and the convergence law needs to be brought in place, and then it could be a simultaneous exercise, because we are in for digital India. We are definitely there, but then we want to help to reach it in the right way.
Mr. Duggal, would you like to comment on that sort of convergence which is needed between the mobile penetration and also internet penetration?
Definitely, I think that's the need of the hour, because at the end of the day, you cannot really go ahead and achieve that vision with a handicapped law.
Right.
The law is to basically enable the entire process, and I am concerned about two important things that are particularly not being talked about. First is the requirement that digital India must ensure that data of Indians must remain within the territorial boundaries of India. In case if we are going to have intermediaries, and we are going to have large number of intermediaries joining on to the digital India bandwagon, we have to make sure that they do not take away the data of Indians outside the territorial boundaries.
Because when you're talking about convergence of services, the data will be shared, you know, with other service providers also.
Add to what
but the
Pavanji
question
is
is,
saying, that there is no convention in India that India has signed for cyber crime, and transporter crimes examination of those problems, investigation, as we all understand, is a huge problem today.
Right.
And
most
data anonymity is also not there. We don't have any law. You are the authority.
Absolutely.
We don't have any law which says that data can be stored, used, but anonymity of the sender or the provider would be kept.
And
So we need to
more
look into
significant-
it.
Yeah, purely, and more significantly, I mean, we need to somehow look in to what Russia has done a few months back. Russia has actually come up with a law which mandates, well, if you are any service provider,
Right.
you're not bothered.
Right.
As far as data of Russians are concerned, they will have to be physically located in Russia. A similar thing will have to be done in India, because imagine if the Indian data of Indians are going to be traveling outside India, it's going to be misused to the detriment of the sovereign interests of India per se. That's one. Number two, the entire rights, obligations and responsibilities of intermediaries need to have a fresh look.
Now, with a huge population like ours, how do you see this really happening? Because this gives me an idea this is going to be really an ambitious task as far as implementation is concerned. You know, if you talk about services, like let's start with passports, which now have the e-Seva thing, e-business portal for investors who want to invest in the country. But again, that's a big challenge. They've said that, you know, ground reality hasn't really changed. FDI is not really coming in at that level. Basic services, you know, even if you have to think of a ration card or of a driving license, still you are struggling. So, you know, when a consumer on the other side wants easier services, how quickly this will happen?
I don't see a way out. I mean, this is the right way. You have to leverage technology to provide for public service delivery and for delivery of other services. Let me give you just one example to see the kind of transformative impact that, you know, e-services can have on people's lives. And you talked about corruption earlier in the program. You know, essentially, you know, if you look at the railways ticketing service, the IRCTC,
Right.
it's been an enormous success. I mean, everybody who's used that portal, who's used to buy tickets, you know, recalls, at least I recall in my college days, standing for hours in queues, and sometimes at the end of the day when I reached the counter to buy my ticket, I was not able to buy a ticket because I was on a waiting list and I had to go back, come back again. The transactions costs that one had to incur, and all that resulted in a lot of corruption and rent seeking and
Right.
black marketing of tickets. Now that system, it hasn't gone away. There is still elements, traces of
But you
corruption.
also
in
have,
that,
you know,
but it's
instances of a
completely-
slow and a very hanging website. You know, when
Right,
you're trying to
right.
book a
But
ticket,
but
you know,
that's-
especially
doesn't
between
mean-
the 8 to 10
No,
slot,
sure.
it's impossible.
The
We
fact
have
that
empowered
there-
our citizen now because they moved on from that system to this system, so they're demanding, and that's precisely what we should
So
do.
are we saying that we are also evolving?
Yeah.
If the consumer is evolving,
we-
so is the government evolving. Yeah.
Technology has to be leveraged for public service delivery in India and for other delivery of other services, because that's the only way out. You made a point about 1.3 billion people.
Right.
There is no way that you can reach 1.3 billion people by having physical kiosks. You have to leverage technology, and it's available, and the whole world is doing it. And IRCTC is what we need to, if there are problems in IRCTC, we need to fix that digital portal rather than, you know, say that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. There will be problems, but I think the immense opportunities that, you know, digital India presents
Right.
will take care of a number of things, and Pawan had referred to them
I
in
have
in
a
in
suggestion
the
which
problem.
is,
He had
you know,
referred to
important to make
accountability, he had
here.
referred to transparency, you know,
sorry.
all of that.
Okay, yeah.
I have a suggestion to make, that just like we have the free legal aid, we should in rural India, in the phased manner in which you would like to conduct the Digital India program, have an e-knowledge center where you know, the villagers could even come there and understand how to operate the systems, and initially any kind of you know, hitches or hesitation, because you know, the mindset is not there.
And maybe also start with social security schemes, like in the case of
Yes.
MGNREGA, where use
Correct.
of ICTs are really empower
Correct.
people. And this has happened in states like Andhra and Karnataka, where we have seen tremendous
Yes.
performance. But
and the Jan Dhan Yojana,
And the Jan
Prime
Dhan. I
Minister's
also
Jan Dhan Yojana, which actually, you know, enable the direct benefit transfers into the bank account using a UID, using secure measures. Hopefully, it will be implemented well, and that will help.
okay, I'll give you a quick comment.
When
Okay.
he says UAID, I mean, I would say with Aadhaar card, if you recall, we always said Aadhaar card is not mandatory for whatever good reasons.
Right.
That's what
Okay,
Supreme Court says.
so policy is not clear. Now with regard to corruption, now he said IRCTC has removed corruption, but I saw corruption in a computerized manner when I saw land records.
Right.
Okay, and Digital India has been able to insist on removing that element of corruption by insisting on re-engineering.
Right.
Because when land records were computerized in first in first out basis, the person third in the queue.
I'll come
Yeah,
back to the
yeah.
corruption issue, but there's a report by Goldman Sachs, which says that if India was as digitized as Taiwan, our growth rate will really go up, and maybe we can achieve the targets of double-digit growth rates if Digital India dream actually is fulfilled. But it's now time for me to take a short break. Next, when we come back in our final segment, we'll specifically try to understand how Digital India can have a big impact on the governance model of this government. Stay tuned.
Are men from Mars?
And women from Venus?
Who is the better half?
Who takes the decisions?
Who is responsible?
Who is demanding?
Who is submissive?
Who is independent?
Can men and women ever find common ground? To find out, watch Gender Discourse every Thursday, 4 p.m. only on Lok Sabha Television.
किताबें बहुत कुछ बोलती हैं, लेखनी चलती है और रच जाता है एक नया संसार। किताबों की खामोशी को आओ पहचानें, उसकी दुनिया को समझें और जानें। साहित्य संसार में हर रविवार शाम 7:30 बजे।
Grab all that is making news headlines in the national, international, business and sports arena. Watch in-depth news analysis, watch perspective. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Digital governance minimizes human intervention, making the administrative process more efficient and transparent. The biggest benefit of e-governance is the elimination of touts and middlemen who are often responsible for corruption, delays and red tape. The high level of penetration of mobile phones accompanied by the availability of cheaper smartphones has provided tremendous opportunities for using mobile devices for public service delivery. So in this particular segment, let's try and understand how important Digital India will be in terms of governance. So in our final segment, we are asking how Digital India can transform country's governance model. Coming back to you, Mr. Dugal. Governance and administrative efficiency, high on agenda of the Modi government, which said that maximum governance, minimum government. Digital India model can promote this whole governance concept of the government. But in terms of, let's look at the social security schemes, MGNREGA, where ICT is a very, very strong model. Do you think this can be a step forward where the government can introduce the ICT concept in important social security schemes and then go ahead with the Digital India model?
Definitely. In fact, the focus of this government has been to somehow use the constructive use of information technology for the ultimate betterment of citizenry as a whole. And I think that's a great step forward. But going forward, if we really want this to be a game changer, and I personally believe that this can be a game changer, if some important issues are concerned with and are specifically dealt with. The first issue is this entire Digital India program is built on principles of participative governance.
Right.
Now, principles of participative governance currently don't find mention either within the Constitution mandate or under the IT Act. So somewhere down the line, we need to do our homework and give legal enabling support for participative governance, which is currently missing. The law only talks about electronic governance in a very limited, regimented manner. So we will need to work that. Number two, since we are going to piggy ride on mobiles, and large of them being smartphones and smart mobiles, we'll have to ensure that the mobile security elements will have to be taken into consideration. Why? Because howsoever brilliant and howsoever secure your Digital India platform is, at the end of the day, if the connecting mobile is not secure, your entire security is as strong as its weakest link. So we need to look at that. Third thing, I think I've been hearing even yesterday and today a lot of focus on UIDAI and Aadhaar as being an integral part of the Digital India project. I have my concerns there primarily because Aadhaar is a surrogate baby. It does not have any legitimacy. There's no law passed by the Parliament of India which has actually mandated or given legal sanctity to Aadhaar. More significantly, there have been reports that Aadhaar is not even compliant with the parameters of the Information Technology Act 2000. So I think given the fact that the UAIDI is one of the biggest collectors of biometric data, and we are not even secure on that, given reports that Aadhaar has been given to dead people, to a living tree, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But going forward, and given the current litigation that's pending before the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court in 2 orders of September 2013 and March 2014 has crystal clearly laid down that Aadhaar is not going to be mandatory in the country till such time they decide the matter. I think if we are going to link the Digital India program by mandating again the Aadhaar element, there could be some areas which could bring in some conflict between the executive and the
Right, so
judiciary.
big ideas, we have to really push these big ideas with a significant law, otherwise the big ideas will fall flat, and that's where the big challenge is when we're talking about Digital India, as Mr. Dugal pointed out about participatory governance. You know, even if a citizen wants to participate in a particular way, you know, you never know if a citizen is being punished for that participation. So how do you tackle that challenge?
You know, litigation will, you know, help settle issues. The more capital intensive the sector and the more investment, and you saw the number of rupees or crores of rupees that have been pledged against the Digital India program, I think it's going to be a very, very capital intensive kind of area or sector, and therefore litigation, I think, will also be a corollary or will be a part of the evolution of Digital India. I agree that the law needs to be right. For example, if Aadhaar is not mandatory and you're going to use Aadhaar for biometric verification in order to transfer Narega money into accounts for people to avoid, you know, duplicating them, or you avoid excessive subsidies that you give to people, if that's going to be the need of the hour, I think that the law would need to be fixed. But litigation, I think, would be an integral part of the evolution of the Digital India, you know, campaign or the Digital India initiative. And you know, as precedent will get created, the law will become clearer, and then implementation will happen. But let me make a point about the fact that, you know, we cannot just, we have to, you know, involve, we have to kind of integrate technology into our delivery mechanism. If we don't do that, we are not going to be able to provide those services that our citizens need. And I'll give you one example of how powerful this tool can be. Of late, there's been a lot of discussion on the fact that the internet is not going to remain free. It's going to be captured by a few vested interests, including a few very large companies that are going to charge on both sides of the market. They're going to charge the consumer side as well as the content provider side, and they're going to walk away with a lot of money, and they're going to compromise the principles.
And the net neutrality debate
exactly. I'm referring to the net
Right.
neutrality debate, and that debate is very much one. And one of the big service providers in India you know, launched a package in which net neutrality principles were clearly compromised. And there was a name and shame game that was unleashed on the internet, and there was so much social media pressure that that service provider was forced to actually withdraw that package. To everybody's mind, that was a discriminatory package. So I think the power of participation, the power of being able to, you know, demand better services, the power of greater transparency, the power of greater accountability is what the Digital India comes with, is what the internet comes with. And we have to leverage that. And the law needs to be put in place.
And in no way you can deny the role of technology when you're talking about
let me just make
e-healthcare.
one point, is that the fact that the law is not in place means that we need to put in place, right? Because and we should put it in place, because if Aadhaar today does not have the sanctity of the law, I think Aadhaar is something that will enable us to avoid, you know, to deduplicate, to avoid all those ghost, you know, people that exist and are beneficiaries of
So
the
you need to have a law, but as far as technology is concerned, you cannot deny technology in crucial services. Talk about e-healthcare, e-education, e-books, everywhere. But innovation is a key word here. And do you think that startups will now have a very big role to play, you know, and the sort of tie-ups, you know, even when the government is looking within the MEA, inviting international relations professionals to join and looking for outside ideas, do you think it's even time for the government to have startups playing a major role, e-commerce taking up entrepreneurship?
Yes, I fully agree with that, and I've been saying that we need to lure market players to garner more funds. But I also personally feel that to make them stay here and to really invest, we need to make the whole ecosystem very conducive to them. Now, I personally feel if there is already a bad governance in place and you're trying to add technology to it, you're just going to have technology-based bad governance. So I would really insist on a re-engineering of the whole process. That is, make good governance, bad governance to good governance, and then expect people to be a part of the ecosystem in a more sustainable manner. And for doing that re-engineering, we need to actually look at the stumbling blocks in the process. And for that, we need to talk to our citizens and get their needs and aspirations from governance. For example, if you go to Kerala and you try to advocate an agriculture mandi bhav software there, which I saw, when it happened to be a coastal area, and all of them were laughing on our face that we always wanted a fishery-based information system and not an agriculture-based system.
Right.
So we have to be inclusive in true sense of word to make all this very sustainable.
And also addressing the diversity, because, you know, they
Yeah,
cannot be,
demographic,
they cannot be, you know, one fit all model for all the states of our country. But I'm left with last 5 minutes on the program. I'll start with you. Final comments. Now, when we are looking at the implementation and execution, your biggest doubts and things which you are completely convinced that we can, you know, easily implement this.
You meant the doubts, or you think
both the things?
Okay, both the things.
Yeah.
As regards, let's talk about the positive first. As regards the positive features, we are definitely going to have people being empowered through this medium, and we are definitely going to reach out to the masses. And it's going to be a link to various, you know, I would say, especially in terms of rural India, knowledge which they don't otherwise easily get, views of videos or otherwise, you know, even seeds, for example, information on how to grow seeds is something which a farmer would appreciate and get for free. So that's something which I think will be of really immense help to the rural India. And phased manner, those websites which pertain to them in their vernacular languages can be at least, you know, those can be packaged for them, if not the entire internet. And secondly, as regards the doubts, when you say doubts are the capacity building in the first place, as I said. That's number one for me, because unless and until we explain to them, they don't know the value of the thing that they have before them, the gadget, and they have to know the pros and the cons both. So when you talk about data, I mean, the device has to be secure, the technology coming with it has to be secure, proper antivirus is there, and if you're talking about cloud, your DigiLocker schemes, like you're talking about e-governance, the Official Secrets Act is there in place, the biometrical information could be there. There could be several other issues, especially health records. How much secure is going to be that platform is what is the need.
So data privacy is a big challenge.
Versus national security.
Versus national security. But 250,000 villages, you want to reach these villages. Also, you know, when we talk about these social security schemes, or be it even the Digital India program, you have to let the consumer on the other side know how it is going to benefit them. And that's where the challenge is, because, you know, we have seen this in many, you know, be it Sakshar Bharat, be it functional literacy programs, most of them say how it's going to help us. So this is one challenge where the government will have to address, to tell them that this is something.
This is the communication link.
Awareness,
the protocol, the communication link.
Communication, quickly, Professor.
So I just personally feel a lot of campaigns have to be built up, a lot of awards have to be, you know, set up, so that right from the students level, the literacy has to be built up right from the school level. And all this should be done in a manner which is very conducive to their own system. And I also feel amalgamation of the traditional knowledge systems which are there at the grassroots should be done with ICT in a manner that we do not refuse what they also offer us. Only then the blend would be more acceptable to them.
Final comments from you, Professor Katoria.
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? And there have to be demonstration effects. Technology at the end of the day is only a medium. It's only as good as what you put in it. And as I was saying earlier in the program, the success of mobile was premised on the fact that you had infrastructure and people in India love to speak, and they spoke. In digital India is not going to work that way. It will require a whole ecosystem, and I think technology can be a great bridge. You will need content, you will have vernacular, you will have local content which is conducive to local needs, which serves the local needs. You will have to have access, you'll have to have smartphones, you'll have to have devices. A whole ecosystem needs to be put in place.
A whole ecosystem needs to be put in place.
And there has to be demonstration effects that it actually benefits. Demonstration effects, and there are lots of positive, you know, pilot programs that have been done that have a has transformative changes. You asked what's the impact of internet. I'd love to say that, you know, internet and telecommunications is a general purpose technology.
Right.
A 10% increase in infrastructure around telecom or internet will have a major impact on the rate of growth of GDP.
And we have seen how
And
farmers
it's a
have been, benefited, you know, in terms of asking what sort of produce.
They built a WhatsApp group, farmers
So-
in
Right.
Maharashtra sell
Okay.
So there are
Final
lots
comments
of-
from you, Mr. Tuggal.
There are lots
Yes.
of good examples.
Yeah.
Well, all I can sum up to say is that the Digital India program is a Kaya Kalpa program. It will aim to transform India, but some things have to be looked into. Our cybercrime approach is very, very shallow. We need to really strengthen our laws on cybercrime. We also need to make sure that at the end of the day, the Digital India program does not become an opening slot where somehow we are exposing the Indian nation. So therefore, there will be a need for a digital army to go ahead and protect the digital interests of Digital India.
Right.
And at the end of the day, at no point of time should we allow any kind of a breach or unauthorized intrusion in such a manner so as to prejudicially impact the sovereign interests of India as a sovereign nation.
Right, so some serious groundwork needs to be done when we talk about the implementation of Digital India. Looks like a huge challenge, but then kudos, just the beginning. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Duggal, for joining us in this program. Professor Katuria, Professor Malhotra, and Ms. Seth for joining us in this program. And that's all we have for you in this edition of Inside. Thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.